And boom, we are back. New year 2020. Alfacast continues, and we are so excited for what's to come this year as we grow Alfa Vedic and we grow this community and we continue moving forward with the podcast. We have a really exciting month planned already with some amazing guests. And you can find all that information if you join us on Telegram, t.me/Alfa Vedic. Really is the best way to stay in touch with our community and stay up to the know on everything we're doing. You can also, if you're not into jumping into Telegram and just want to get email updates, that's a great way to stay on tap with Alfa Vedic and Alfacast. And you can just go to alfavedic.com and a pop-up will allow you to join the mailing list, or you can just scroll down to the bottom of the site and join the mailing list that way, and we give weekly updates on everything we're up to. How's it going today, Dr. Barre Lando? Great to have you back on the show and start fresh for 2020.
Michael, ha'ali makahiki ho to you and to the tens of thousands of people joining us live worldwide.
Yes, and showing your Hawaiian roots, love it. And it
took many years to get that one line down, but I finally did it.
Yeah, I don't even, what's the reply? What am I supposed to say back to that? I don't even know. Aloha, I guess.
I don't know any further than that.
Well,
aloha's 2 words, so yeah, you can count that as 2 words in your Hawaiian vocabulary. It means hello and goodbye, as you probably know.
Yes, I am familiar. That's
so
great.
You're more fluent than you understand.
Well, mahalo. There you go. I've got a
3.
few. I've got a few. Well, hey, I'm excited about today's chat as we dive into 2020, and I had a great holiday, and we were able to hang out a bit with the whole Alfa Vedic fam, and I know you guys had a wonderful stay with the fam coming up, and you know, and the holidays are great because we get to celebrate family and celebrate in a way kind of the changing of the seasons, and of course we celebrate Christmas here, and then we just had a wonderful New Year's party at our place here. A lot of the community came, and love the holidays. But you know, with those holidays come for me, you know, my normal routine kind of gets disrupted. I definitely had a few slices of pie and a candy cane here and there with the kiddos. So it's good to kind of get back into the regular swing of things. And this topic today is, I think, very apropos for this time of the year as folks get into New Year's resolutions and looking towards how to start off the new year in a really healthy way. And what are we talking about today? We're talking about fasting. And I know you have a presentation for us today, Bear. So let's jump right into it and get going on fasting 2.0, as we're calling this Alfacast.
Yes, it's going to be a very timely discussion as we capitalize on the many people feeling guilt right now for their shameless holiday indulgences.
Yes, and and did you indulge at all?
No.
You were like a monk.
I spent my entire holiday season in austere contemplation.
Well, I definitely indulged in everything from fatty prime rib to pumpkin pie, pecan pie. You know, and then I actually did some intermittent fasting during the holidays, just out of necessity and just normally what I do. So I would take 12 hours off during the day and then just do a light salad for dinner, and then another 12 hours off. And that's probably a strategy we'll talk about today is intermittent fasting. Another thing I got for Christmas, shout out to the mom and pops, is a Tribest juicer, one that I know you guys have as well, and we'll probably discuss that today. And so I've been cranking the juicer the last few days, and God, it's amazing. It's one of those slow grinding ones, or masticating ones, or whatever you call it, but it's a slow juicer. and it is phenomenal. So I'm really excited about having the juicer, because I'm going to be using that a lot as I get into some intermittent fasting starting next week.
Best juicer on the market because it produces what is comparable or maybe even better than pressed juice. And pressed juice is quite the fad in California tonic bars, whereas the dual masticating augers very slowly squeeze out in a pressing-like fashion all of the fibers. And I think it even, I used to have a Norwalk, which was a pure press, and the twin auger works even better. Then it has some ceramic magnets on it that slow down or eliminate the oxidation when the juice comes out. It's the best one on the market for sure.
Well, thanks for helping my parents out with that, and I'm really pumped on it, and looking forward to juicing a lot of what I'm growing. So that's really exciting. I've got a ton of celery in the greenhouse going and stuff, and I know that's a big trend, the celery juice, but I just like doing it all, just a big mishmash of all sorts of vegetables and stuff. So really excited about that. But yeah, how do you want to start off with the fasting, and how do you want to kick this in?
Well, last night I kind of whipped together a little PowerPoint. Boy, it's such a vast topic that I had some hard decisions as far as what to include and what not to include because there's so many things we could explore. And the most difficult part is, what the heck do I call this? So I came up with fasting is nutritive, because it sounds a little confounding to most people. Fasting is what we typically think of as not eating. So how can it be nutritive? Well, think of a sponge that is saturated, and then you wring out the sponge. Well, now the sponge can actually absorb more. And that's exactly what fasting does to your entire digestive system and every cell in the body. You need to wring that puppy out every so often in order to not just eliminate things, but to increase the efficiency of absorbing what you do need when you do eat. So fasting is nutritive. It's the best I could come up with. And what else? Down below the subtitle is the yin and yang of eating, because like everything else in life, there's two sides to the coin, and there's eating and there's not eating, and you have to understand that you need a balance between the two. So would you like me to knock things off with getting the PowerPoint up here? I'll go back and forth there.
Yeah, let's throw the PowerPoint up. We know traditionally a lot of the really ancient civilizations, India, China, throughout Asia, they all have this tradition. And also in the indigenous cultures, right, there is a solid tradition of fasting for health. And I feel like Western medicine is just now catching up and kind of showing, and with their kind of prism of viewpoint, that yes, this stuff is real, it works, and it should be an important aspect to everybody's health.
And as usual, there's value to all perspectives. And those of us in the Western world have added some new twist and been able to validate in different ways why those folks back in the day knew what the heck they were talking about. So can you see are we on?
Yeah, looking good
here?
And for those listening on the podcast, we have some slides that Dr. Lando has set up for us here. And so as we're streaming live on DLive, those following can watch this, but those listening later on the podcast, we'll have those available on our website. We'll have a blog post with those that you can download.
Okay, so we'll save soccer mom for the last on this page and start off with the historical perspective. How's that sound?
It sounds good.
Okay. Fasting is an adaptational coping response. So what do we mean by that? There was a time where, if you look at the second point, a continuous supply of non-seasonal, non-local food is an historical anomaly. There was a time where people did not have foodstuffs available, especially certain types of foodstuffs available all the time, and especially year-round. And the bodies were, let's just say, genetically trained to adapt to not eating as well as eating. And of course, Mother Nature has a tendency of knowing what to do and supplying the types of foods that would nurture us more perfectly from season to season. So, it might not make sense importing foods in from tropical regions, even though it's nice to have a pineapple in the middle of winter. It's really doesn't always coincide with what your body is doing in real time in a different locale. Now, fasting is something that was the norm, and that, we're not going back to archaic notions of cavemen and people derived from monkeys and that sort of thing. But what we are saying is traditional cultures did have a closer connection to nature, and they, did make available with or make use of whatever was available. And a lot of times things just weren't available. And periods of not eating were actually very important periods where it made their body more resilient in that they had to adapt to the situation. And also, as we're going to talk about today, bodies are healthier if you aren't inundating them with food and burdening your digestive system around the clock every day. Regular fasting provides a biological reset for health and longevity. We'll give a little evidence from both clinical experience of my own and also from other clinics around the world, and some good research that's been done to evidence that this is in fact true. And the last little comment we say there is that I have is humans are genetically better equipped to deal with food lack versus excess. So if you had to, of course, you don't want to starve yourself, but you're much better off having periods of no food or little food as opposed to having an abundance of food or too much food. And we'll talk about why that's so. Now, let's get to the soccer mom here. You have to forgive the cheesy images I came up with, but I was in a hurry and a pinch last night. So, back when I was a kid, if you went into your mom and say, in the middle of the day and said, "Hey, I'm hungry," she'd say, "Get the hell out of here, go back outside, and we don't want to spoil your dinner." Now we have committees that are formed so that moms are assigned, on any given day, who's in charge with bringing the halftime snacks, and of course, there always include juice boxes and cookies and things that are, if you are going to snack, probably the last thing you want to provide if you don't want to screw the kids up. So it's really a new phenomena where we think that we've got to eat all the time, and it's a horrible thing to have a little bit of an empty feeling in your stomach. And the other thing for the rest of us, if you're in a productive daily life cycle, with work and creativity, it really shouldn't support the, what I call down here, the foraging lifestyle, where people are constantly snacking all day long and, going out for lunch and having 6 meals a day. And of course, the medical profession has kind of piled on here and made things more confusing because, the cardinal sin, of course, has become you don't want to let your blood sugars drop. And in fact, that's the best thing you could possibly do, because it will entrain your body, as you'll see, to burn fat reserves or go into a state of ketosis, which is actually an extremely fast-growing trend these days with ketogenic diets. So we'll give you a little bit of an idea about what that means and why it's good for you, and also why, like anything else, you don't have to become a ketogenic zealot. There's a way to do things in moderation and understand why you're doing things and how to adapt any situation or program, including a ketogenic diet, so that it works for you, whether you're a carnivore, a vegan, or somebody who has an infirmity, or somebody that's in perfect health and just wants to be healthier. Okay, so any comments so far, Michael?
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, the comment here about humans are genetically better equipped to deal with food lack versus excess, which makes a lot of sense in terms of historically what humans were dealing with. We have definitely a massive issue with that right now in terms of overeating, especially in the United States. So there's this feeling that, yeah, the soccer mom thing is apropos for our society. It's funny, me playing sports, I played very competitive soccer as a kid, and I never wanted to eat after a game, or especially halftime. The last thing I wanted was even an orange slice. I just wanted water. I didn't even like Gatorade. I felt like it was too sweet, and I would drink water, and that was it. And I wouldn't eat till maybe 3-4 hours after a game. And we had tournaments. I remember not wanting to eat, between games, and we'd go to Subway or something. And my mom would always be concerned, but then they just got used to it. Oh, he doesn't like to eat after. And that was just, I think, me listening to my body, and I performed better when I wasn't weighed down by a bunch of heavy carbs and stuff. So I remember that, though. I remember the soccer mom thing. That's funny. But yeah, no, definitely we have an epidemic of overeating, and we're surrounded by food everywhere we look. So it's never before that we know in the known history of man has it been this easy to get terrible food in your system immediately. You can go right to we talk about this on the show. You can go right to a 7-Eleven here in the States and grab a Snickers. And what is the Snickers bar whole ad campaign? It's the hangry idea, right? You're hungry. When you get hungry, you get angry. So grab a Snickers and you'll fix yourself. So we definitely have that prevailing mythos in society now that feeling hungry is bad. Having an empty stomach is bad. We live in a evolved civilization now where you should never have to quote unquote suffer that. So what do we have now? We have epidemics of health, heart disease and hypertension, and you name it, which are all dietary related. So this is important to.
When I was growing up, you didn't see obesity. I mean, you just didn't see it. I think we had one kid in our class who was a little chubby, who would actually be considered lean by today's standards. And, everybody else was skinny as a rail. And, this is definitely a new phenomenon. When I played high level competitive sports well into my adult years, and back then, all we had was your own body and experimentation. And I came across a methodology that worked for me so that I could train and perform and actually carry a huge body weight. And I found that I didn't like to eat during the day at all, because it did weigh me down. It interfered with, the high level training that I do. And I just intuitively restricted my eating window, and I still was able to maintain a 280-pound body weight and lean muscle mass, and perform quite well. So everybody has different chemistries. And just like we do with a lot of our other talks on diet and other health strategies, we want to constantly reinforce the reality that because we all have our own idiosyncrasies, that you want to be informed with the different discoveries people have made. Look at evidence from research and anecdotal accounts, but then experiment with your own body, because, if you're following someone else's program verbatim, you're going to miss a mark quite often. And,
Yeah,
these days
there's
no
no,
dogma.
yeah, no dogma, and there's no single modality or solution that fits all. It's the most important thing is self-discovery and doing the journey for yourself and learning how to listen to yourself, your body, follow your intuition, and understand that you have life cycles you've gone through and so much history behind your psyche and behind your emotions and everything, that in conjunction with what season you're in and what's going on with your life right now, that the idea of diet just doesn't play that way. So,
And speaking of dogma, what a great segue. So, fasting fallacies. There are, we are inundated with fallacies, and again, mostly from the conventional institutionalized system of medicine. And, what you have to understand is us doctor types, we're programmed and mind washed more than the average population, and also restricted in what we're allowed to do and say, especially when it comes to matters that conflict with pharmaceutical sales and conventional modalities. And so because of that, when you first start doing searches, internet searches and your own research on fasting, you'll see the same old stuff about the dangers that have all been disproven, about how you can really damage your internal organs and so forth if you participate in fasting. So let's just start with some basics here. What are we afraid of with fasting? Well, before we get into some facts that would dispel the myth, consider our most basic nurturing and survival instincts are most deeply entangled around issues with food. And if you bring up just the idea of missing a meal, let alone a whole day or let alone a week without eating, it would freak most people out. Most people really don't think they can survive a day without lunch. And, not saying that derogatorily, it's just, it's real. People do not believe they can survive if they have a little gnawing feeling in their stomach. The other thing that we really need, in addition to just using fasting and food as a way to, maybe train our mind over matter, which is, what we're really here to do in the first place, is to obtain knowledge about, what fasting really is, what it does, and all the benefits associated with it. And then also you'll see that the disproven dangers that we hear about all the time, really are not based on fact. The next point here, no endeavor more profoundly dissipates reactive emotional programming than the routine practice of fasting. When you get the hang of fasting, not only are you training your body in some very healthy ways that will increase health and longevity, but you're also going to have an up-close look at yourself on many levels that you can only gain with the clarity that fasting brings. And so there's a reason why fasting was traditionally used not just for health and considered a normal part of life, but it was also considered a real integral part of spiritual practices. And we can even describe how fasting increases perceptual bandwidths. When you don't constantly burden the digestive system with food, which requires a tremendous amount of energy in order to break all of that down, it opens up energy pathways that are then going to be circumventing the digestive system and going to other energy centers that will open up those other areas of perception. And that's a real important thing. Also, food brings in energy fields of its own. Every foodstuff is, as we talk about in our understanding that the universe is actually an electrical affair and not a physical affair as we think of it. Everything is based on energy fields, and every foodstuff is an energy field that you bring into your body. So all those competing energy fields will dampen perception into those other areas that would give you maybe insights that would bring you even greater health and, all the things that we're desiring in the first place. So here's just a couple simple facts. Now, as we're going through all this, we really have to consider this today can only be considered as a survey course. And what we'll do in the future, of course, is to bring in other guest speakers and even expand ourselves into any one of these areas. But our goal today is to allow, a broad perspective of the different ways of fasting, why you might choose one versus the other, and how you really have to see what works for you. And of course, just understand what you're trying to personally achieve in the first place. So let's go here. The average 70 kilo male has approximately, that should be 7 kilos of fat reserves. Sorry about the typo. And that would equal a 40-day supply of fuel. Yeah, you wouldn't want 70 kilograms of fat reserves. You might not pass the lean body index if that was the case. Anyway, a 40-day supply of fuel for the average male. Now, females have an even greater abundance of fat reserves. That's why we chose the male as an example. And the first 24 hours, when you do fast, you typically will utilize stored glucose or your sugar reserves. Now, after that 24-hour period, and now this is evidenced by research by some very well-known clinics that for decades have serviced people from around the world that go there to cure, different maladies that they have. And boy, talk about successful. I'd say this fasting clinic and others like it produce more positive results and healing effects than any other form of medicine. So after the first 24 hours, your body starts utilizing proteins, which proteins are then converted into glucose for energy reserves. Now, this is the source of a lot of the things you hear that fasting can be dangerous, because if you are using proteins, then of course the concern is that you're deriving those proteins from muscles in the body, and that you can in fact start eating away at your lean body mass. And then even more dangerous, the organs of the body, especially the heart, are also muscular tissue. And then you can start, having, a real breakdown of organs and possible heart failure and all sorts of damage to your organs. So that's the source of all the dangers that you hear about all the time. But here's what the research shows, and which is repeated research keeps coming up with the same exact results. And that is, after 24, 48 hours, the body then shifts from using proteins to convert to glucose for fuel, and instead turns to the process of breaking down fats for fuel, which is producing ketone bodies, or what we call ketosis. And a lot of people know about these days. So it's actually going to, then, keep us lean and healthy, rather than having an excess of glucose, which will then be converted to fat stores, which is why we see all the obesity that's epidemic these days. So if we want to train the body to not be fat and to have a lean, healthy body mass, then regular periods of fasting will in fact educate the body, or re-educate, because the body knows what to do, but of course it gets in the habits that we put it into, and it will then retrain the body to turn to lipids as the primary source of fuel, fats that is. And as we already mentioned, the average male has at least, these days a lot more, but at least a 40-day supply of fuel. So you're not going to break down organs and lean muscle tissue with a fast, especially the types of fasts that most people do.
Yeah.
All right. How are we doing so far, Michael?
Oh,
Oh,
we're doing good.
why the picture of the dog there? Well, that was, I was just trying to humorously depict what most of us are like when we have our food supply threatened. And, this picture looks exactly like my dog when you make a motion at its food bowl when it's eating. And never try to reason with a chihuahua, forget about it. So we get very emotional when our food is threatened, and we get quite reactive, and prevents most people from looking into real easy cure-all techniques.
Yeah.
Okay, Michael.
Um, Interesting. As far as retraining your body to have a more lean physique, I know of people who, and maybe this is a strategy that's coming up or not, but I do know of one strategy where someone I know has lost over 100 pounds who was obese, doing the every other day fast. So eat what they want one day, and then after dinner don't eat for an entire 24 hours, so that obviously all night, wake up, that whole day fast, go to bed, wake up, then around 10 or 11 have a break the fast at the meal, eat a regular day, go to bed, and then just do that. So one day eat, one day off, one day on, one day off, one day on, forever for you know and lost 100 pounds. And so that's an
A
interesting kind of
possible concern with that is, that I would consider a form of caloric restriction. And caloric restriction almost never works in the long term.
mhm.
That's why you always see these programs like The Biggest Loser, and very large people that lose a lot of weight, and then the one that loses the more is the Biggest Loser. I don't think they've ever had a Biggest Loser reunion, and that's because most of the time all those people regained their weight. So there's a bit of a strategy involved with losing weight that goes well beyond just the concepts of caloric restriction. What you really have to do is retrain the metabolic pathways of the body, and again put us back into the normal mode of burning lipids for fuel. And you can control or restrict your calories, and that most of the time doesn't achieve that, which is why people look and feel great after being on Weight Watchers for a while, but then a few months later they're back in the same predicament. And of course that's very discouraging, and it's discouraging on many levels, because they give it their best shot and it works and they're encouraged, and then all of a sudden they're off the wagon and back on a roll. So there's a reason for that. And if people had a little bit more information and better coaching, then it would be very encouraging.
Sure.
So how are we doing?
Good. People kind of wondering more about the fasting, which we're going to get into, like what you have on your fast days, just water or what. Interesting. Russ
Wow.
mentioned he had an issue with being lactose intolerant before intermittent fasting, and now he doesn't suffer from that intolerance anymore, which is cool. Something I've been kind of actually experiencing myself. Same thing here, lactose intolerant. I've really changed up my overall lifestyle in terms of, and you tell me, am I doing a form of intermittent fasting every day? Because like my daily routine is I wake up, 7:30 in the morning because I stay up pretty late working. But then I have just a lemon water tonic kind of thing. So it's just lemon juice, water, some 0 point of our 0 point, and a little bit of maple syrup, maybe, and some cayenne pepper. And then I'll have in an hour or two after stretches and stuff, I'll have some of our thermogenics, which we'll probably talk about today, which is just caffeine in, well, I use coconut oil, but integrating caffeine into a lipid, if you will, right, into a fat for delivery. And then I don't really eat any like solids up until and really dinner a lot now. I mean, I'll have like a kale shake maybe in the middle of the day, but I've essentially turned into what we call an OMD, a 1 meal a day guy. And I'm very content with it now. And something that got really disrupted during the holidays, but essentially my 1 meal a day is dinner, an early dinner. And I've been extremely happy with this. If I am extremely active, which I'm getting more and more because I'm getting into trail running and such, I have a bigger dinner, or I'll have maybe more of a salad lunch or something. But for the most part, this is something I've been doing for months now, and it's been great. So, is this a form of intermittent fasting, or maybe we can start to define what intermittent
Yeah, so
fasting
let's
is?
get into all that. Let's just do one more slide share very quick. I forget
Okay,
what it is, so let's look at it, and then we'll get into all those questions. Okay.
cool. I will say for me, eating less has just proven massive dividends for my health and in my digestive system as well as in my excrementory issues or whatever you want to call it. But hey, when you put in less stuff into you, there's less stuff you got to worry about getting out of you. And I think a
Well,
lot of
your body, yeah, with if you're not eating all the time, you'll actually eliminate more. Things just go through you quicker.
yeah.
So let's just go through this page very quick. I had a tough time with this page because I had to select an image, and I got caught in a social justice dilemma of sorts. My first image was a big fat guy with a tape around his waist, and I had the choice of that or a perfect female physique. So my issue was, well, on one hand, I'll get accused of fat shaming, and then the other hand, I'll get accused of glorifying the perfect female physique. So being a dude, I chose the feminine aesthetic. So can't win either way. Okay.
Good decision.
Uh,
I
Similar
approve.
to the beneficial effects provoked by purposeful cold exposure, controlled food deprivation stimulates hormonal events that reduce inflammation and increased resilience. So, yeah, we talk about a lot of practices, including, Wim Hof method and so forth. And very similar to that, when, the body is purposefully stressed, what we find is, well, a couple things. It's very empowering because, again, it cultivates that mind over matter and starts dissipating the victim mentality where we feel like we're at the whim of all external circumstances. And at the same time, when the body is trained to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, it builds resilience and adaptability. And that is then mirrored to our immune system, which becomes stronger, as they found with the cold therapy. Same thing with fasting, and longevity is greatly increased. And the longevity in the case of fasting happens on many levels, that are the reason for that. So here's just, we could write a book on this, but these are just some quick highlights. And I know not everything's in here, but clinical and research evidence includes basal metabolic rate increases after 4 days of fasting. So metabolic rate, just decipher that as efficiency. Our body becomes much more efficient in everything it does after 4 days of fasting. And, there's a lot of great people out there. You can go on YouTube, and there's good doctors and just regular folks that have really informative videos packed with information, clinical factoids, and so forth. I'm more of a blue collar clinician, we'll say. I really keep up with research as best I can, but I spent the bulk of my career years seeing many people every single day for many years. And so you tend to do a lot of trial and error and just find out what works. And the one thing you find in clinical practice is that what you read about in books, or hear lectures about, or read the research findings, it rarely works that way in real life, but it does give you a good glimpse of possible events that will happen. But then you learn to really have to think on your feet and honor the variables, the idiosyncrasies that exist in every single one of us. So I think clinicians have a very unique perspective that's invaluable, because you'll always have people that will read certain things and then just, or hear somebody else's experience and then just expect the same results. And again, that rarely occurs, but there's benefits to both sides.
Yeah,
And
you're in the real world, seeing real world effects on different people, which is the real life, not just a book.
yeah, and just like you, it's very rare, or maybe has never occurred ever, that you'll see an economics professor in charge of a Fortune 500 company. They're, it's a different world. And same thing with
Well, unfortunately, they're in
doctoring.
charge of the Fed many times, but yeah, hence our problems. But yeah,
Yeah.
not without going on a tangent here. Okay.
Okay. So clinical and research evidence includes, will continue, a 2-day fast triggers the genetic expression of mechanisms to protect normal cells while decreasing the survival rate of cancer cells. Now, cancer, I hesitate just to throw it out like that, because that's a whole different thing. Cancer cells are a response to something else. It's not a disease. But let's just put that aside, because many people find themselves in a predicament where these cancer cells, although understood, take on a life of their own and create real problems. And fasting actually, just after 2 days, creates a situation where genetics that we all possess are stimulated, that initiate mechanisms that protect normal cells, and then at the same time will create an effective autophagy, which is the breakdown of cells that are either diseased or damaged, tissues that really do need to be eliminated from the body. So, in this case, the cancer cells have overstayed their welcome. It really knocks those down better than anything else. And for people that insist on chemotherapy, and I'll just leave it at that, because I have some very strong feelings about it based on the effects I've seen with thousands of people for years, which is never positive. Um, it actually helps people survive the chemo. And many cancer survivors these days are actually, in fact, chemo survivors. And good bioterrain medicine, coupled with fasting and such kind of techniques, will actually help people survive the chemo. And in fact, if you are doing chemo, it actually helps the chemo knock down the cells you're actually trying to get rid of in the first place. So there's some folks, I believe one of my countrymen from Italy, who's a biologist doing research at University of Southern California, who has shown that the chemotherapy is much more effective and less dangerous when people fast for a period of 2 days prior to having a treatment. And that's worked very well for a lot of people. Okay, sorry, a few tangents here. Fasting also improves mental health because it produces a calming effect and also antidepressant effects. And the original fasting clinics that began in the old Soviet Union, actually were based on uh, clinics that specialized in psychological disorders, asylums, and that sort of thing. And they found when they started fasting people that people actually became more coherent and functional, and actually were able to heal their psychosis, and in many cases very severe psychosis that was resistant to all other traditional means, and also allowed these people to get off their meds and so forth. So very important. And the rest of us that aren't committed to an asylum, it's going to really improve your outlook on everything, your mental health, your mental acuity, and have a very uplifting effect on your psyche. Another thing fasting does is it promotes human growth hormone production. And human growth hormone is like the youth hormone of the body. When we're kids, we have a very active thymus gland, which is responsible for producing a lot of the growth hormone. And it's very large. And then by the time we're adults, that thymus gland, which is right behind the sternum, shrinks to a very small size. And it's really not supposed to do that. So there are ways to promote regenesis of the thymus gland, which is going to help your whole immune system, as well as increase the levels of human growth hormone, which will help you repair and regenerate and greatly retard the aging process. So that's an effect of fasting. We already talked about reducing chemo side effects. Eliminates joint crystals. A lot of joint issues are because joints are a favorite suppository in the body for different, uric acids and other toxins that are overwhelming the body's elimination systems. And then those in turn create inflammation within the joints. So, fasting helps clean out the joints, which is why a lot of people, one of the first things they'll say is, wow, my joints feel better. They don't ache anymore. And that sort of thing when they're in the middle of a fast. Normalizes glycemic sugar levels, in other words, insulin and triglyceride and other blood chemistries. That's borne out time and time again in relevant studies. Let's just get through the rest of these quicker so we can get to everybody's questions as far as how we actually do things. Fasting has been shown to reduce blood pressure, respiratory and heart rate, and overall energy expenditure. So, you become more like that 0 point energy where you don't need as much incoming energy in order to provide for your energetic needs. You're just more efficiently creating as well as utilizing energy. And that, of course, is going to make a big difference in the way you feel. And then, of course, normalizes body composition because you are training the body to preferentially burn ketone bodies, which is your fat stores. Okay, so the next slide here, fasting strategies. Any comments first, Mike?
Yeah, just some general chatter going on. Everyone's enjoying it. We were just kind of saying it's just amazing how you're talking about these Russian the Russian clinics and stuff. uh, how amazing and simple these techniques are when we're in modern times trained to think that the first thing we need to do is if we have some sort of issue with depression or a psychosomatic issue or anything, that the number one thing to do, of course, is to consult your physician, who then goes into their book, right, their Bible of solutions, which is basically connecting the dot to the pharmaceutical drug to take. And people are that's how we're in trained thinking now, and versus uh, doing what an animal would do in the wild when confronted with something that's an anomaly. What do they do when they're not feeling good or they're injured? They don't eat, and they go and they sleep, and they repair themselves. So our own mental hubris is literally destroying our health.
And what could possibly go wrong with taking 17 different pharmaceuticals daily?
Yeah, no, it's everybody's will only do wonderful things for us in the brave new world.
Yeah.
Huxley
And so
nailed it with that book.
we've talked about a lot of this, in our past discussions. We've got cold therapy and all its great effects. We've got exercise. How about exercise? Good sleep. Very important. We'll do a whole discussion just on sleep alone and what happens when you're sleeping on all levels. You've got not eating. Um, all of these things are simple and free. And, I always chuckle. We have all these ongoing, discussions in different groups where, guys are trying to figure out how to put more lead back in their pencil or cure some kind of whatever, or increase their lifespan there, or just have a happy day happen. And in it, we get into biohacking with nutraceuticals and all the kind of academic theories, whereas the most important and effective means are under our nose all the time for free.
Yeah.
And on top of it, not only do they work better, but they're very empowering because it all falls back in your lap and the rightful place that you have in healing your own body. It's not somebody else's job. It's not a doctor's job. Now, a good doctor can help your journey and give you proper coaching and, maybe give you some shortcuts, but you still have to do it yourself. And you're still in the long run going to have to rely on these things that we're talking about right now. Otherwise, you're always going to be disempowered and dependent. And that is not going to build a healthy, productive society of sovereigns. We'll just say that.
Yeah, and
Okay,
and your
so
sovereignty directly relates to your health. So you understanding that you are free and you are in control literally directly will affect your physical, mental, spiritual health. One thing too about the sleeping, when you're fasting, and this is something like mystics will talk about, the mystics, the monks up in the mountains, they'll do like 30 days fasting, then they'll do, or let's say even less extreme, they'll do 15 days of fasting, then 15 days of hardcore mystical intention, and then they'll do another 15 days of fasting, and they'll have full on out of body experiences, and they don't even really need to sleep. Once you're really kicking in the fasting, and I've only done it a few times, but I did like the cleanse, the master cleanse. I did 15 days of just lemon water, maple syrup. I was like only a couple hours a night of sleep, and I was just full of energy. And I remember going on like midnight hikes through, I was living in San Francisco at the time, through Golden Gate Park, and like tripping out, almost having like psychedelic experiences. So it's a spiritual awakening too that you can get from doing these practices.
You're absolutely right. So let's look at fasting strategies now. These are talking uh, topics, discussion topics, and each one could turn into quite an involved discussion. All I'm able to do on a single page here is to give some very cursory information. So please chime in with any comments or questions that you're getting from the peanut gallery there. So the first thing we want to entertain is duration. How long should we fast? So here's the different approaches. So to answer the question first, ask yourself, what do I want to do? What issues do I have that need to be addressed? And then you're still going to have your own experience, your own trial and error experienced over patiently conducted over a period of time. Don't jump in with radical measures first. Just kind of test the waters gradually and see what works for your body, because again, your body is different than anyone else's body on the planet. Now, the first type we have is intermittent. So intermittent fasting, which everybody's talking about these days, is simply narrowing the daily eating window. And when we do that, it again is going to promote ketogenesis, increased human growth hormone production, and it's at the same time going to reduce digestive burden. So it's a very healthy way to begin some type of fasting. And in the long run, the cumulative effects possibly even superior than just doing a longer fast occasionally during the course of a year. Intermittent is a great way to go too, because you can begin with a larger eating window, for instance, like an 8 and 16 kind of approach, where you have 8 hours where you're eating, and then you just make sure that for 16 of the other hours in the day, you aren't eating anything. And for a lot of people, that would actually narrow their window. Now, 8 hours of eating, for a lot of us, that leaves a lot of time to get multiple meals in. But for a lot of people, it's a good way to start, especially if they're used to foraging. And then you can gradually narrow that window into 6 hours, 4 hours, and 2 hours, or whatever works for you. We'll talk more about intermittent fasting at the end here on the next slide. So let's just jump to another approach, which is a 1 day per week fast. I really like this method. I used it all for many years when I was playing sports, and I still do it. And it provides a more gentle approach. It's not as daunting as 3 or especially 10 plus days of fasting, which is more for advanced people, and also for people that have trained their psychology to be able to handle the concept of actually missing a few meals. So it's a more gentle approach, but with very profound long-term cumulative effects. So if you consider 1 day per week, that's 52 days a year. Now, there's two ways, and that's a lot of rest on your digestive system, and it's going to have great regenerative effects and a lot of other positive effects. And again, on a cumulative level, it's going to start to do some of the things that people say, well, you can only achieve if you're 3+ days. And we'll talk about what those things are in a moment here. Now, one way to do it is, of course, you eat your supper the night before, and then you get up the next morning and you don't eat until the 24-hour period has passed. And that gives you a good 24-hour break, and then you just maybe eat a lighter supper that night, and then, to break it, or break it some other way, and then get up the next morning and you're back on your regular roll. I prefer actually extending it through the next evening and breaking it with something light the next morning. And in my case, I like to do it with a ketogenic approach, and kind of the bulletproof kind of technology, but we'll talk more about that too. But I think 36 hours actually is more beneficial, and you can definitely handle doing that once a week once you get the hang of it and train your body. So that's a good way for people to just jump in with another approach. Now, 3 days is the next level. And 3 days, a lot of people would say, well, you have to do at least 3 days, because what you're doing in that first 24 plus hour period is you're thoroughly depleting glycogen stores. And then you're going to, kick into more of a true ketogenic metabolism, burning the fats up. And in the process, you're going to initiate a deeper cellular elimination in autophagy, which is, again, the breaking down of unhealthy tissues and elimination of those tissues from the body. Now, 3 days isn't going to allow you an extended time of that deep cellular elimination, but it will initiate it. And let's just say if you did 3 days once a month or every other month, again, you're going to have a good cumulative effect from that, and a lot of good things can happen. So if you're curious about that one, jump in, have your own experience. And the next phase is 10 plus days. And now this, really shouldn't be experimented with, first timers, because it's not only going to put you through deeper elimination, which may require other types of assistance in order that the things you're eliminating don't create symptoms, which in the healing business we call the Herxheimer reaction, which means you're actually having an intoxication of the things that are being eliminated. Now, it's always temporary, but it can be uncomfortable. And if you're not extremely healthy going into this, or if you don't have proper coaching in order to do other things to help you through it, then, it may not be that much fun. Now, when you go into clinics that specialize in helping very sick people at the end of their ropes cure themselves, they will do these extended fast. And of course, these types of people are not healthy going in there, but they do have a team of folks that are monitoring their blood chemistries, that provide daily activities, light types of exercise to keep the lymphatic systems flowing, different types of massage, colonic irrigation and low bowel, coffee enemas, that sort of thing, that will help things move through. And with that kind of support, they're not only able to get through it, but typically after a couple of weeks, they feel like $1 million, and a lot of their symptoms or any evidence of disease starts quickly disappearing. So you can engage on a very long, more strenuous type of approach from the onset, no matter what your condition. However, you really need to be aware going into it of possible complications and having the necessary support in order to get through it. For the rest of us that are, relatively healthy, you might want to start with intermittent fasting. You might find that in the long term, that's all you need. In fact, I would argue that that's the case. 1 day a week per fast is a fantastic approach, and also can be combined with intermittent fasting. And I'll talk more about that. And then the 3 day is a great one to, just kind of train yourself to withstand the idea of not eating for longer periods, and also as a possible preface to jump into longer 10 plus day fasts, and which are amazing. You would be astonished at how you feel, if you can successfully get through 10, 20, or even more days, and different symptoms that you may have, how they just miraculously disappear. And it will make a believer out of anybody as far as the effects of fasting. and it will forever change the relationship you have with your own body, and extremely self-empowering.
Yeah,
So,
I guess true to my
go ahead.
own personality, I didn't follow that advice because I was like early 30s and unbalanced lifestyle, a DJ, drinking alcohol, eating a lot of crappy Asian food when I lived in San Francisco. Not, I mean, Asian food's good, but like noodles and stuff. And in the house we were renting, discovered this Master Cleanse book. It was a little paperback book from the original author of the Master Cleanse because our landlord was an old hippie, and I was so attracted to it. I told my wife, we were newly married, I'm going to do this thing. And she's like, okay, well, I'm leaving town for a week, so do it then. So I did 15 days of it and no prep. And, I was a young, healthy person, though, overall. And I feel like I was needing it. And I will say, everything you just said, spot on. And while I didn't have the support, I mean, I could have just stopped whenever, but it was life-changing. So it really was. And the Master Cleanse, for those that don't know, is the fresh lemon juice with B-grade maple syrup and cayenne pepper. And you do that whenever you feel hungry. You mix it up, and then you also do a saltwater cleanse every morning to flush the system out. And I was getting definitely by like day
so
4.
many.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say there's so many techniques like that we could talk about, and so we'll keep bringing this topic up with ourselves and our guests periodically. So someday we'll cover most of it.
But I just wanted to say, well, you can jump. I mean, we don't recommend it. I jumped into it. I was healthy though, young, healthy, and it was life-changing. So that was a 15-day fast I did. That was the first time I've ever fasted, and I'm a little more of an extreme personality. I just jump into things, but it forever changed me. So, yep.
Okay, so after duration, which type of fast? And this gets into some of the questions there. We can have water only, juice, or we can add protein from a source such as algae. So water is a little more difficult for most people that aren't experienced. Of course, you're dealing with hunger more, and you just have to be ready to deal with that. It's no problem once, again, you get the hang of it. And so I'd say maybe advisable for shorter durations of fasting. Unless a person is really on their A game, an extended water fast may create electrolyte imbalances. It could create, complications for some people. When you lower your potassium levels, for instance, you could start experiencing heart palpitations and such. But for a seasoned faster, the body can even cope with extended water fast, but not for most people. So 1 day a week fast, water would be fantastic. Intermittent fasting, you might just use water if you want to have a true fasting, a pure, let's just say, fasting effect on the part of the day where you're not eating. And we'll contrast that with other techniques in a moment here. Juice is a great way to go because juice can actually increase the cleansing effect of fasting and actually enhance some of the reasons why you're trying to do a fast in the first place. The only thing I'd add is you don't want real sweet juices because then again, you're raising your glucose levels. And one of the things I would want to do in a fast is train that ketogenic response, again, burning up fat as sources of fuel rather than providing glucose to do that so you don't have to kick into the ketogenic mechanism. So I would emphasize, and this is what I do personally, I would just do predominantly vegetable juices. I like celery juice myself. I'll use the Green Star juicer that you just got there, Michael. And, I'll do a whole bunch of celery. Maybe I'll throw in one apple. Now, apple has amazing properties. I just don't overdo it. So it just has a very, very low sugar content mixed with the abundance of celery juice. I'll throw in a little parsley and some other things, that can have another good cleansing effect to target certain organs like the kidneys or
Cucumber.
liver. Yeah. All, whatever, and experiment, see what works for you. I also like to add just a dash of fresh ginger and fresh turmeric root, which helps with the anti-inflammatory effects, and with the ginger, really increases the digestive fire to help the digestive system, eliminate and be active, even though it's not needing to digest any food. So juice is a good way to go. And of course, it's going to make any fast much more pleasant, because if you're just sipping on juice throughout the day, then, it really helps with the hunger pangs and makes life a lot easier. And it's much more safer, especially with celery juice. It's supplying a good amount of electrolytes and things so that you don't throw everything out of whack and start
Can
having
you
possible problems.
can you give us a quick? My mom was asking this. What's the whole kick with the celery juice fad? I mean, what's celery got that's so amazing?
Celery, before it became a fad, way back years ago, I used to prescribe it in clinic for people with that needed a nervine type of tonic, when their nervous system was depleted and when their adrenal glands were exhausted. Because when the adrenal glands are in what we would consider an alarm mode, in other words, they're over vigilant and working overtime, then certain hormonal issues will arise where the kidneys start dumping valuable electrolytes and sodium levels that will wash us out even more, increase fatigue levels, and create all sorts of other problems. So I knew back then that if people started, in those states while we're doing other things to regenerate, the nervous system and adrenals, the celery would help the whole journey expedite and make people feel better along the way. So now celery also has other properties that people consider very cleansing. And for the celery juice diet, it does promote great elimination, in the digestive organs and the bowels. And if you go on one of these pure celery juice regimes, then you might not stray too far from a latrine, because things do move through you. But the celery works on a
It
number
makes
of
sense.
levels.
It makes sense why it's a fad then, because most people are adrenal tapped. I mean, just in modern society. So we are in a constant
Exactly.
frenzied state these days. So that's makes a lot of sense. Okay. One quick question
So
too.
the last thing,
Can we
go
just do
ahead.
one thing that's on the water? It's on this subject on the water. Russ asked, what about if when doing focusing on water, doing like a tea?
Water, pure water, will have an entirely different reaction on your body than a tea or other kinds of liquids. So tea is fine, but you don't want to substitute water with tea. What you want to do is have both.
Mm-hmm.
And herbal teas and different kind of teas can be very effective. In fact, even an abundance of green tea with levels of caffeine is very cleansing and can have very positive effects. So green tea can be very valuable during a fast. Just have ample amounts of water also, because water will have water is a universal solvent, and that's why it works so great to help the body flush itself out. And once you mix anything in with water, it's going to change the properties and have a different effect. So you don't include that as your water content or water amount during the day.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. And of course, as far as any kind of tea, I, of course, have a strong bias that the best herbal tea going would be Jiao Gulan. And there's, we'll do a little talk just about all the amazing things that herb does, which I think better than any other single herb on the planet with all its capabilities. Okay, so the last thing is you can add some amino acids in the form of one cell algae organisms. Now they're very bioavailable. In that form, it doesn't require digestive effort, and also can supply vitamin B12. And it might be a consideration for people that are concerned about the loss of lean body mass because of any existing issues or neurological issues. So the addition of amino acids with algae is a possibility. You'll still get the nice cleansing effects and reduce workload on the digestive system. So you'll have some good fasting benefits. However, you're probably going to sabotage the autophagy mechanism in fasting, which again is the breakdown and elimination of unhealthy tissues in the body, because as long as your IGF or insulin growth factors are present in the blood, then you're probably not going to trigger a very efficient autophagy. And amino acids will most likely dampen that effect, if not eliminate it entirely. So again, it requires just, all right, what am I trying to do? What do I want to achieve? And will algae support or sabotage what I'm trying to do? We good on that?
Yeah, and that's another great thing to remember too for all those vegans out there. Get your algae for your bees.
Yeah, B12 is important, and it's a great way to get it. Algae also has good essential fatty acids and a lot of other things. So it's a very important food, I think, to include in any kind of vegan or vegetarian approach. So last question, and then we'll move into a more, we'll elaborate a little bit more on intermittent fasting and finish it up with any questions. How are we doing for time? Are we good?
Yeah, we're good. We're an hour and a half in, so I'd like to not go longer than another half hour so we don't wear anyone out.
Okay,
So
so
let's crank it up.
okay, so we'll wrap it up quickly here. Just a couple final comments. Is fasting right for you? So I would advise just patiently acquire information and experience, beginning with less advanced approaches. Monitor your metabolic efficiency. Now, if you're left on your own, that's not that hard to do. You can just go by how you feel, and how you feel is really, in my opinion, all you need to know. But you can get glucometers where you measure glucose. You can get other instruments, refractometers that can measure your total body sugars as opposed to just blood sugars. And there's a way to understand what both of those mean, especially when you have both sets of data available. That'll be the subject of further talks in the future. Too much to get into right now. You can also, get little meters that will measure the amount of ketosis you're in, whether you're in fact burning ketone bodies or not, and see, where you are at any stage of fasting and before you go into it. And then above all, just keep in mind, fasting is natural, safe, and intuitive. It's as old as the hills, and it's not a newfangled idea. And the newbies on the block, especially those in the conventional medical system, really have no experience or information, period, that would allow them to make any legitimate comments. All right. An intermittent fasting approach. So I just singling out this one type of fasting a little more than the others for starters, because I think it's a great way to go and something that anybody can do. I got a little shot of Deb outside this morning milking the yaks, so that's why I have that up there.
Nice.
Um, okay, so why does it work? Well, it's easy to accomplish by gradually reducing the eating window over time. So you can just take baby steps and get accustomed to it, and not have to feel like you're getting into any radical fasting, and have good results from the start, and increase those results over time as your body gets more adept and efficient. Um, it also is a very good way to go, because it can accommodate any schedule or lifestyle with all the cumulative benefits of fasting. So again, rather than taking a multi-day window in order to achieve an effect, if you're patient and just do this day in and day out, the cumulative benefits will accrue and give you the same effects as a more strenuous fast, and in the long run, maybe even surpass the benefits of longer fasting. Again, what are you trying to do? And have your own experience and see what works for you. And one thing that most people experienced, and I certainly do myself, is you have a demonstrable increase in energy, mental acuity, and reduction of common symptoms. What I like is I can just get up in the morning, and because I'm not trying to fix breakfast and digest food, and now I use we'll call it the bulletproof method, not
How dare you?
referring to a well, I'm not referring to a brand name, but just like we say, oh, I'm going to Google something. Well, regardless of the browser you're using, we still use Google because it's become a verb. And, bulletproof now has become a concept and an approach that is not referring to a particular brand that also exists out there. So I don't know what else to call it that people will be able to relate to. So I will
Yeah,
just say,
I'm just
the bulletproof approach. And we'll tell you why that can work, and things that you may or may not consider that technology in conjunction with intermittent fasting. And so let's get on to that. So a technological approach, and again, we're getting into the bulletproof concept here. Yak butter mixed in black tea was, another type of is a centuries old Tibetan practice to withstand harsh weather and lifestyle conditions. So they found over many, many centuries that it works. It helped their body become more resilient. It helped them maintain energy and blood sugar levels throughout the day to withstand the harsh conditions that they survived in those locales. And so, of course, there is a particular brand name out there that has a great marketing story about trekking in the Himalayas and coming across this mystical tradition and bringing it to the Western world, and that's good. I have no problem with that, but I did, and many of us were made aware of it in Asian medical studies, many years ago. And my first introduction to this topic was in naturopathic college in the latter 70s. So it's really nothing new, and no single individual brought it to the Western world. And okay, enough on that. Again, good marketing. So here's some truth about the bulletproof approach. Micellized caffeine does sustain blood sugar and energy. And micellized means when caffeine source such as coffee and tea is blended with a particular source of fat, which could be butter, coconut oil, and so forth. then the caffeine becomes bound in the fat molecules and has a nice kind of a self-sustaining or time release effect. And also, when it's taken in that form, for instance, I've never been a caffeine drinker. My body doesn't do that great on it. I'm kind of high idle by nature to begin with. And so not only does it mitigate hunger, but it also reduces the caffeine-related adrenal crash, which someone like myself and a lot of people would most assuredly experience. What goes up must come down. So if you have more of a sustained time release effect, it doesn't have as much of a stressful effect on your adrenal glands, and you don't have any associated crash. Most people, that is. Okay, so the question is if you're in an intermittent fasting regime, does it interfere or disrupt the fasting process that you're trying to achieve with what you're doing in the first place? So in other words, if you get up in the morning and blend some caffeine, and you'll see in a minute, the bulletproof approach that was made popular, of course, utilizes coffee exclusively. And the original technique utilized black tea rather than coffee. And we're going to talk about many other caffeine sources that can suit different taste and chemistries much better than if you're just confining the bulletproof technology to caffeine from coffee beans. So does the introduction of the fats in the bulletproof technique disrupt the fasting process and its benefits? So a purist might say, well, you're introducing calories, so therefore, let's get out of the screen share here for a second. So therefore, you might lessen the effects of some of the effects of fasting, such as human growth hormone production and others that are stimulated after calorie deprivation. All right. But there are many benefits in addition to some of those other benefits of fasting that will not be disrupted and even possibly enhanced by the introduction of caffeine and fats, say in the to begin your day, and then eating sometime later in the day in a very narrow eating window. Now, there's evidence with a lot of people that the introduction of calories with fats doesn't interrupt the fasting at all, and in fact enhances the ketogenic effect. There's a YouTube couple, a doctor couple, I believe. What's the name of their channel? Two Fit Doctors, I think, something like that. And they did their own little study, and they aren't the only ones, but it's the only one I can think of at the moment, where, being doctor types, they monitored their own blood for ketone bodies and glucose and things, and tried different trials with just fasting with pure caffeine, which won't disrupt. Even fasting purists will say no, caffeine won't disrupt the fasting mechanism. And then they monitored themselves when they did MCT oil, did it again when they just had butter, and then again with just coconut. And they found in every circumstance, the ketogenesis was not disrupted, and therefore the fasting mechanism was, in many cases, actually enhanced beyond not having any fat source at all. But, again, have your own experience. You decide if it works for you. On the positive side, besides enhancing the ketosis of the intermittent fasting, which seems to be fairly universal, it can also make your day a lot more enjoyable. it will really curtail. Hang on a second here. It'll really help curtail hunger and make it easier to not only feel better, but sustain your energy, mental acuity, and so forth throughout the day. And makes it a breeze really to get to your one meal and really have a more fun time with the whole process, as opposed to having just a pure fasting approach without the bulletproof. Other things you can do if you aren't doing the fats and caffeine in the morning is you can, have teas. You can have just straight coffee. You can have things like apple cider vinegar, which can have other positive effects. You can put a little bit of Himalayan salt in your water, which can also sustain electrolytes and things that will again dampen hunger pains as well as sustain your energy levels. So there's a number of things you can do, a lot of things we could talk about. I'm a fan of intermittent fasting. For me, it works, and I know a lot of people that I work with, it really works well and doesn't at all really ruin the effects of the fasting that you're trying to achieve in the first place. So let's see, let me get back up on the screen here and you jump in with any comments from the folks out there, Mike.
Most people just saying that they agree that caffeine can play a vital role in dispensing in the hunger and allowing for the process to work easier. And as
Yeah.
far as what I said earlier, that's kind of what I do. I do intermittent fasting in that sense, where the only thing I'm really getting in my body for the first, since dinner the night before, so we're going on, I don't know, 16 hours is just the coffee with our primal essence chaga coffee. So it's got chaga in it, but and it's got Hishi Wu in it, so it's got some herbs and stuff. But
yeah, we'll put that up on the screen last, and we'll go through it real quick. But what works for me is I like the daily intermittent. I like the bulletproof in the morning. It's great because I just brew that up first thing, and then sip on it. Through mid morning. Typically, I'm still sipping on mine right now. And I can jump into a workout right away. Usually take the dog for a walk, and then when I get back, I do my stretching, and if it's a resistance day, I'll do some kettlebells, or on alternate days, I do my Tai Chi ball exercises, which can actually be very taxing because you're doing sustained periods in a very low squatting movement kind of fashion that is amazing on many levels for your physical as well as energetic cultivation, we'll say.
Shout out to our guest from last month, Certified Health Nut. I've gotten into Drunken Monkey Qigong, doing that every morning, and he's got videos there. If you guys want to go back to our guests we had before Christmas last month, but Troy Casey, it's great because it's something that gets your whole body flowing and moving, and it kind of gets all the nerves ends going and firing, and you just kind of get all loose, and it's fun. And so I've been doing that every morning, the Drunken Monkey Qigong.
Drunken monkey movements are pretty crazy, and it's when you watch a really good practitioner of those techniques, drunken monkey, kung fu, it looks like a very relaxed sort of way to move, and it really does mimic monkey movements, but it's a very advanced technique and hard to become adept in. I asked Troy when he was on if he favored any movements, animal movements, and there's a lot of exercise techniques where you go through a lot of different movements done by different kind of animals, everything from reptiles to mammals. And it makes you, it's an amazing way to exercise. And anyway, enough on that. Troy said not so much, but if he's doing a drunken monkey technique, he's most assuredly incorporating at least one animal movement in there. So, okay. How did we get off on that? So
Next slide.
Okay, next slide, last slide. Thank you. There's something else I was going to say, but probably wasn't that important. The most important, the Alfa Vedic thermo-infusion system. Now, we're just going to do a shameless plug here, but I am quite proud of our technology here because it is very unique, and it does very matter-of-factly bring us well beyond bulletproof, we'll say. And again, we'll use that as a general concept rather than a brand. And we'll talk about why. So now with the bulletproof technique, of course, there's different oils that you can use. So the first question up there is, should we use MCT oil? So Mike, being a good Catholic, I'm sure you can decipher that next phrase there, nos natura mater inspira, which means in nature we trust. Yeah. So the reason why I put that there is, you take pure, unadulterated, cold-pressed coconut oil, which is what I favor, and then you put it through a process to synthesize more, or to isolate, and it does become synthetic in a way. And what you're doing though is you're isolating the more medium chain fatty acids, because in vitro laboratory testing, which means unreal conditions, although there's a time and place for those kinds of studies, they found that the medium chains seem to provoke the ketogenic effect more efficiently. But again, just like when we enter into the field of herbology and we see similar studies where they isolate certain elements in herbs that they then say, oh, that is responsible for the positive effects of that herb. And then they try to standardize or isolate that one component and isolate it from all the other ways that only Mother Nature understands why it's in the package it's in, because it works better on many levels, especially when you get into the understanding of informational fields. And Mike, you always point out very accurately that it's a difference between digital and analog. So MCT oil is a digital version of the real analog version, which has the more complete energy fields with all the synergistic qualities that make coconut oil recognized forever as one of the most effective healing substances on the planet. And one thing that, now there's different medium chains, there's 6s and 10s, and you can get a little bit more technical about it. And some of the different medium chain varieties are better tolerated than others. But in most people, any of these MCT oils, if they're overdone, and in some people not even overdone, they will create digestive disturbances and other symptoms, which you wouldn't get with just the whole complete analog package. So, your body's trying to tell you something if you get the runs after having too much MCT oil. Yeah, so my thing, my very strong bias is it's very lame to try to improve on Mother Nature. We better put our efforts into understanding Mother Nature and mimicking Mother Nature rather than biohacking standardizing and isolating and trying to reinvent the wheel.
Well, it's
So
exactly what big pharma does. They synthesize, what herbs do, and then that way they can market and package and patent. And that's what
yeah,
this brand has done. So yeah, moving
yeah.
on. Just get.
Okay,
It's
so
hard. It's hard.
we
It's
beat
hard
that
to
up.
brand coconut oil, right? It's like you can get it anywhere.
Yeah. Now there is one brand, and I think we're going to start carrying it as a package for our thermo infusion system on our website. And I'll talk more about it later. But they have a new cold processing technique that leaves things even more unadulterated. And by that process, actually enhances the medium chain essential fatty acids that they're trying to achieve in the MCT oil synthesis in the first place. But in this circumstance, you aren't adulterating the coconut oil, you're actually preserving it even better. And so we'll probably be carrying that as a package with our whole system there. The other thing that's great is grass-fed raw butter. Now, if you don't have access to raw butter, which they don't in many counties because our good people in health departments have deemed that raw butter can be dangerous or raw dairy can be dangerous. Never mind that as kids we just had a big pitcher of raw milk on the table at dinner, because our extended family were dairy ranchers. And not only did it, build nice, strong, healthy bodies, but never saw a side effect in my entire life from all the people that used to drink it. Okay, so grass-fed raw butter is even better, but in a pinch, you can get grass-fed butter made from pasteurized milk as a second option. And now, Paul Chek, who I admire very much, he's like a walking encyclopedia. I tell anybody to watch his videos. You'll learn a tremendous amount. And he did his own research and experimentation and felt that raw butter micellized the caffeine molecules even better than coconut oil. And I kind of go along with that, because I go back and forth between the two depending on what I feel like day to day. But raw butter does seem to, combine with the caffeine even better. But that's just me, and I also trust what Paul says. And on
I
the
kind of
other
like.
hand,
Well, I was just gonna say I kind of like the energetics better of coconut, though. For me, I've done both. I don't know, and the flavor.
yeah. I was just going to say that coconut oil works for me better in other ways, and so that's why on any given day I just kind of ask myself what I feel like and let my body make the decision. And when you have that little dialogue that you can cultivate with yourself with some experience, just go with your first hit and go with it, and it'll be right 100% of the time.
I'll say one more
Rather
thing
than getting,
too about
yeah,
the butter is that with any dairy product, you want to make sure you're getting your butter from a reputable source that sure it may be raw, but what are they eating? Also we have contaminants. So we have radioactive contaminants that go into the soil that the cows eat, and then they get compressed into the dairy. So these are just things we need to be thinking about too.
bioaccumulation through animals can definitely be a factor. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what we have to offer here, the thermal infusions. I call them thermal infusions because caffeine has a thermogenic effect on the body. In other words, it raises metabolism. It can make metabolism more efficient if you don't overdo it and have like 16 cups of coffee a day. And it also raises, in raising the basal metabolism, it raises temperature and other things that can have a positive effect. And so I decided to call these thermo and infusions because, you know, you're simply taking the caffeine source mixed with other herbs and infusing them in either a cold brew methodology, or just like you steep a quick cup of tea in the morning, you can pour hot water over these brews in a basket. Or in the case of our Primal Essence Chaga coffee, you can use a French press and just do it that way, and make it the same way you make your regular coffee. And you know, then pour it out into you know, a personal blender, throw in whatever fat source you're going to have, and drink it down. It's no more complicated than that, and no more difficult than your regular morning coffee. But don't confine yourself to coffee. Now, coffee, in the situation with our Primal Essence formula, we do mix it with whole chaga and he xiao wu. We won't go into a whole tutorial about those two herbs, but he xiao wu is one of the prime tonics in Chinese medicine to replenish kidney energy, which is our bank account in life. You know, our energy reserves are stored by way of the kidneys. And in chaga, probably one of the most beneficial adaptogens on the planet. So not only are you getting a nice thermogenic or ketogenic effect with the caffeine from coffee, but any of the more drying and stimulating effects with the caffeine are balanced out with those herbs that simultaneously regenerate organs while the coffee is stimulating those same organs. So I like always to mix the caffeine source with different herbs to, you know, have a more balanced effect. And it just tastes like regular coffee. You know, we made sure that, you know, you get a very generous amount of both chaga and he xiao wu without creating, you know, or ruining the coffee taste. Now, a seasoned coffee connoisseur might discern a little something different about this, but it just tastes like good tasting coffee, especially when you mix it with the fats. The only thing I wouldn't do with these is add sugar or sweetener,
For
you
fasting.
know, unless you do it very, very minimally, because that can raise the glucose levels and mitigate the thermogenic or the ketogenic effect. However, if you have a very tiny bit of some kind of natural sugar or maple syrup, it can pop the flavors a little bit and not disrupt the effects too much. And
Like
I'm not a
honey, maple syrup, or even maybe get away with
yeah.
the,
Yeah, and if you do that, you might explore lower glycemic sugar alternatives, um, xylitol from not corn derived, you know, which is all GMO stuff, but birch bark xylitol, which is organic and very clean, has a very low glycemic index, and a little bit goes a long way. So you could use just a smidgen of that. I personally don't care for the taste of stevia that much, but there are some organic stevias out there that don't have too much of an aftertaste. And if you just use just a little bit, you know, it can pop the flavor so you don't get any stevia after effects. And of course, stevia has an even lower glycemic index. But if you're cool with just taking it black or plain, then that's good too.
Can I throw
So the
one more
next
thing
one,
in? Can I throw one more
yeah.
thing in? General note here, people are wondering is we do recommend using a personal blender. Doing this, a shaker really won't get the job done. I posted a link in chat here for the Tribus personal blender that we all use and love because it's so modular and easy to use and powerful and just never breaks. I use it. I've been using it mine every day for God 7, 8 years, 6, 7, 8 years now. Not an issue. Really high quality, really worth the investment if you're going to be doing this every day. But yeah, using a personal blender, even like a bullet blender or whatever, is great. And it gets it all frothy and nice. It's like we call it like a frappe. So it's just it's very pleasurable to drink.
And on our new website, which, by the way, I think we made some good inroads on that over the holiday break, but our new website, we will offer some packages, including personal blenders. And I, too, favor the Tri-Best because it works so well, and it's very inexpensive and lasts forever. I use mine for years. They never wear out. So the personal blender is better because it has a smaller blending container as opposed to larger blenders where everything kind of splatters all over the place, and it really doesn't have the as efficient micellizing effect. And shakers, you're going to have a hard time achieving that period. All right, so the next one down, we'll finish up here real quick. Here's my favorite, which is guayusa mobilized chi, we call it. Guayusa is in the same family as mate. So think of it as drinking mate, but in the case of guayusa, which a lot of people don't know about, it tastes better, I think. Most people do once they taste it. It has higher amounts of nutrition. Mate has good stuff in it, by the way, but guayusa is even better. And it also has kind of a better, I think, lighter, uplifting, stimulating effect than regular old mate. So we use it in this blend instead of traditional mate. And then we combine it with our homegrown Jiao Gulan. And it's a fantastic combination. And I've got, barrels of Jiao Gulan here, from our last harvest this fall. So I just kind of reach in and get a good healthy pinch of that along with equal amounts of the guayusa, and throw it in a brewer and pour hot water over it in the morning, and 10-15 minutes you're ready to go, and I make my blend. The other one we have, it has a really good taste too, by the way, whether you take it just plain or just pop it with one of the types of minimal sweeteners that we talked about. And the same can be said of any of these other blends. So very quickly, masala herbal chai is a black tea source. It has traditional chai spices. We have a very good tasty blend that a lot of people love. And to the traditional chai spices, we add ashwagandha and reishi mushroom, which are both amazing herbs that anybody would benefit in taking on a daily basis, and also to help balance out the caffeine in the black tea. The next one we have is a great one for traditional tea drinkers, Earl Grey herbal. And again, it's traditional Earl Grey that's black tea with regular Earl Grey essential oils that give it its unique taste. And to that, we add Godu Kola, which is a wonderful adaptogenic herb that has great effects both mentally and physically. One of the top tiered Ayurvedic herbs that have come down through the ages. And finally, and this is one of my favorites too, is green tea floral. Green tea floral is a good one to drink any time of the day. And what it is, it's a very artisan level green tea, and it's infused with jasmine blossom. So it gives it that distinct jasmine green tea flavor. And it's a more mild caffeine effect, but very nice and stimulating at the same time. And to that, we add albizia flowers. Now, albizia flowers in traditional Chinese medicine are like considered herbal Prozac, we'll say. I don't know, maybe that's the wrong way. I don't want to give you the wrong impression, but it's very nice and uplifting. And again, just helps your whole mental state and disposition on life, period. And in the combination with the jasmine green tea, it's a wonderful blend, has a wonderful flavor. And any of these, either plain or with just minimal sweetener enhancement, play with it. And great taste, different effects for different metabolisms. And like the original Tibetan technique, which wasn't based on coffee at all, definitely explore beyond coffee. But for the coffee lovers, we did include our primal essence blend. Michael, take it away. I think that's all I've got.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you what, I learned a lot today. And just, as far as we know a lot of the traditional medical reasons for doing this, but some great techniques and just an overall wonderful summary of how to really get into fasting. And I think that if we had a world where people were doing the intermittent fasting, but people did some form of this every month or once a year or whatnot, and people were really taking advantage of this technology, we would be in a completely different reality. We would have a world of healthier people, more spiritual people, more holistically minded people, and communities too that are more just healthy and helping each other out. And it just would rapidly spread across the globe if we were doing this. I think we're moving that direction. So bravo, Dr. Lando, for putting that together. That was a great presentation. And like I said, we'll have that up as a blog post on our website for those listening to the podcast. But we are over the 2-hour mark, so I think we should wrap this up and let everyone get off with their day. We have some amazing guests on the docket coming for 2020, and we will we've posted those on the Telegram group here. And next week, we have Mark and Richard. So Mark Harridan and Richard LaPlante, if I'm saying their names correctly. And we will be getting into some very cool health, fitness, spiritual guidance techniques that these guys do. Bear, if you want to give a quick little background on our guests next week, and then we can say adios.
Yes, Mark is an old acquaintance of mine. We worked together in different endeavors. He's a brilliant tennis coach and has been in the fitness field and coaching for a good part of his adult life. He will be joined by Richard, who has had amazing success with breathing techniques and reducing the symptoms of neurological disorders, especially Parkinson's. So he will be able to reinforce a lot of what we talked about as far as the benefits of strategic breathing. And him and I just had a great chat because we're both about the same age, and he's an old jock type as I am, so we were just kind of comparing what we do in this phase of life and different exercise techniques. So I'm looking forward to that. And we'll have a good chat about breathing, exercise, and how those things can actually regenerate the nervous system. And he's the proof in the pudding.
Wow. Very cool. I can't wait for that one next week. And in the week following, we have special guest Sivan Bomar, who people may know from his channel on YouTube, Understanding. And he's launched a new social media platform that's really cool. And so we're going to get into that with him, as well as just go down 1,000 tangents of really what is understanding and 0 point, and understanding how consciousness interfaces with everything in our lives. And he's really interesting. So you go check him out on YouTube, Understanding, Sivan Bomar. And then after that, we have our guest, Matt Belair, who Bear's been on his show. And we have many people in our community familiar with him. And Matt is an awesome dude who has a really cool show, podcast on YouTube. So look up Matt Belair if you're not familiar with him already. And we're going to go into, whatever he wants to do. But I really like to focus on the coming transition we're all moving into for 2020 and beyond, because he has so many amazing guests. I feel like Matt has a really great perspective on this. So that's what we have for January so far. The final week we're still figuring out, but we're going to have a ton of amazing guests for 2020. We're really taking it up a notch with the show and with Alfa Vedic. We'll have a new website launching soon. Like Bear said, we'll be offering some new packages and products there, and basically just moving forward in the overall vision for what Alfa Vedic is. So thanks everyone for joining us today. If you'd like to know more, go to alfavedic.com. That's ALFAVEDIC.com. Join us on Telegram, t.me/Alfa Vedic. But all of our social media links are on our website, and we look forward to joining with you next week. Everyone have a wonderful, blessed day and a very happy new year. Take care.